Do you want to learn to draw forests like this on your fantasy map? Well, I'm going to show you how in 3 easy steps. My name is Wes Jones and this is my channel on how to draw fantasy maps. Today we're going to look at drawing forests. There are several ways you can draw forests. I'm going to show you one that I use quite often, and for lack of better terms, let's call this a cloudy looking forest. We can break this down into 3 steps. Let's look at step number 1. In step number 1, the main thing that you need to do here is establish what your forest is going to look like. I like drawing a little guide saying, well, my forest is going to look like that blobby shape. There, you're done step number 1. What you can do next is you're going to put that into the background, so slide the transparency slider down. We'll add a new layer and we'll call this step 2. What is step number 2? Well, step number 2 is to actually start drawing the trees. What you're going to do here is, I like starting with the trees in the foreground. You need to establish what your trees are going to look like. You can have more of a pine shape, maybe you can have more of a broadleaf shape. It doesn't really matter. You just want to be consistent. Of course, you could have a forest that has mixed trees, and that's fine. I'd call that maybe a more advanced technique. And so for this case, let's start with trees that look like this. Let's begin. What I do first is I like drawing the trees in the foreground. And we'll draw these fairly big so this goes fairly quick. And there you go. You can see I've started with this main tree. I often think of this as the keystone tree because it's going to be one of the only trees that you can see all sides to it. And then you start drawing its friends right next to it. You can go around in different ways. You can work from right to left, left to right. I like varying up a little bit and stepping back just to see what the trees look like, to see that they're approximately the same shape. And what you're going to notice is you're going to get to a point where a full tree doesn't look right anymore. That one looks okay, but I'm going to say this next one doesn't look right. What you want to do is you want to draw 3/4 of the tree. As you come around, you're going to want to start drawing more of just the tops, the crowns of the tree. Because these maps, generally fantasy maps, are in a little bit of a perspective, it makes sense to show the front on one side and the tops on the back side. We'll just go around finishing this. I'll make these trees. Oh, that's a little bit too big. Nice thing about working digitally is you can undo. It's big again, but that's all right. We'll go like this, and we'll just add in those treetops. Another secret when you're drawing this sort of thing is don't try to rush through it. Try to keep the same pace. And what that will do is it'll make the trees look like they're all the same and they belong to the same family. What I used to do in the past is I'd draw slow and then I'd start getting faster and faster and it looks sloppy at the end. I can see I don't really like the look at that. We'll get rid of that one, make that bigger. There we go. Well, that's step number 2. What's step number 3? Well, let's write that out. Step number 3. Step number 3 is to add a few details to the map. You can do that, and I can turn off this guide at this point. Don't really need that anymore. I kind of got the shape of that forest. I like adding some more crowns to the middle of the forest and in areas that make the forest look like it's not just a blob, but it's got something to it. Very often I'll find a spot in the forest that makes visual sense and I'll continue the trees into the forest. This just helps give the forest a little bit more depth and gives it a little bit more interest. You can just keep adding little ones. Try and vary it up. I've got a few singles, I've got a few clusters. There you have it. You can add a few more details occasionally, depending on the scale you're working at, this map, to the front trees, just to give them a little bit more detail. Well, you've got a pretty much completed forest. An optional thing you can do is you can color it or you can add some shadows. And I'm just going to show you what I suggest with shadows. Let's just change the brush to this watercolor brush. We'll put it in the gray realm. And what I like doing is it's important to have, if you're going to add color, it's important to make the front trees darker than everything else. Generally, things in the front are darker than the rest of the map. And you'd color this whole thing. And then sometimes what I'll do is behind those clumps, I'll add some shadows just to help with the dimension of the forest. Maybe add a little bit more darkness there. You can play around with this, vary it up a little bit. That's too much there. Oh, that's all right. And there you see, pretty quickly, we've drawn a forest. In closing, I hope you've enjoyed this video and learned something about making forests. Just a couple things. I have a website called fantasymapping.com. You can go there to find out more. And I have a book on how to draw fantasy maps called Fantasy Mapping Drawing Worlds. And you can find the link in the description. Well, I hope you've enjoyed today's session, and I look forward to seeing your maps. Bye.